Hamas Halts Ceasefire talks amid Gaza starvation crisis. As starvation ravages Gaza, international diplomacy teeters on the brink, but here's why the crisis could get worse before it gets better. The militant group Hamas has abruptly halted ceasefire negotiations with Israel and the US, demanding significant improvements in Gaza's humanitarian conditions before any renewed talks. This dramatic shift comes as food and medical supplies for Gazans have reached critically low levels, with reports of civilians dying while attempting to access aid. But here's the paradox. Even when aid arrives, it often sparks chaos. At a recent distribution site near the Kerem Shalom border crossing, Israel fired warning shots mere inches from an awaiting crowd, according to UN officials, a scene described as a heart-stopping spectacle of human desperation. Meanwhile, a new international divide is opening. Canada announced its intention to formally recognize a Palestinian state by September, joining France and the UK. This move has drawn praise from Arab nations including Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, all urging others to follow suit. Yet the US swiftly dismissed the gesture as counterproductive, arguing that any Palestinian state must first gain Israel's approval. You can't create a country out of thin air, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio declared, notably omitting the complex geopolitical realities. Aid efforts currently hinge on a controversial approach. Airdropping supplies via parachutes. These deliveries, coordinated by Israel alongside the UAE, Egypt, and Jordan, are being criticized as both insufficient and dangerous. UN Humanitarian Coordinator Tom Fletcher compared a single airdrop to the capacity of one truck that still can't bypass the bureaucratic hurdles strangling ground deliveries. For every plane that drops aid, Fletcher emphasized, we could have dozens of trucks rolled in. The situation has forced Palestinian mothers to extremes. At a UNRWA clinic in Deir al-Balah, displaced families recounted harrowing struggles. A diabetic mother rationing food for her 3-year-old daughter. A child surviving for months on lentil soup alone. Milk is stolen before it even reaches us, one mother revealed tearfully, highlighting the dual threat of structural collapse and possible aid diversion. Clear evidence of Hamas looting is sparse, but what footage exists paints a grim picture of desperation-driven chaos. Despite the setbacks, behind-the-scenes diplomacy persists. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is undertaking a high-stakes visit, first meeting Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu, then inspecting the work of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a private, U.S.-backed aid group raising eyebrows among Democrats. The trip occurs as hostage families urge immediate action to secure the release of all 50 captives, a central demand that now faces new challenges after Hamas disengagement. But here's the critical question. Can genuine progress emerge without immediate confrontation? The UN reports that during previous ceasefires, 600 to 700 trucks delivered aid daily, a volume now undercut by visa rejections and security delays. We need a flood of supplies, not a trickle, Fletcher implored. Wet Israeli officials counter with allegations of Hamas obstruction. This standoff raises a pressing debate. Is the airdrop strategy a cynical PR move or the only viable option when ground routes fail? What even the most optimistic observers agree on, the next 48 hours will define Gaza's humanitarian trajectory. As Arab nations amplify calls for statehood, Israel grapples with annexation threats, and the U.S. doubles down on sanctions against Palestinian officials. One glaring truth remains. Recognizing a state doesn't stop starvation, summed Budur Hassan of Amnesty International. It only matters if that recognition comes with consequences. The stage is set for explosive disagreements. Should international recognition be wielded as leverage, or does it risk entrenching occupiers? Can the US-Israeli alliance still broker peace? Or has their strategy shifted irrevocably toward containment? We're left with a daunting reality. While the world debates politics, Gaza's children face a countdown neither diplomacy nor airdrops can slow. The next hunger-related death here, tomorrow or the day after, will be as avoidable as it is inevitable, unless something breaks. Gaza crisis. U.S. envoy to visit as dozens killed seeking food aid. A dire situation unfolds in Gaza, where a U.S. envoy's visit highlights the devastating impact of a humanitarian crisis. The struggle for survival has led to a tragic loss of life, with dozens killed while seeking food. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will travel to Gaza on Friday, accompanied by U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, to assess the food distribution efforts and hear directly from locals about their dire circumstances. This visit comes amidst a backdrop of controversy and conflicting narratives. Witkoff's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu focused on the critical issues of food and aid in Gaza. However, the situation on the ground paints a different picture. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry reports a staggering number of casualties, with 111 people killed in the 24 hours before Thursday midday, 91 of them while seeking aid. A hospital director shares a harrowing account, revealing that more than 50 Palestinians were killed and 400 injured while waiting for food near a crossing in northern Gaza on Wednesday. Footage captures the grim reality, showing casualties being transported to Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. But here's where it gets controversial. Gaza's civil defense agency, run by Hamas, accuses Israeli forces of firing at crowds gathered around aid lorries. In contrast, the U.S. President Donald Trump adds fuel to the fire with a bold statement on social media, urging Hamas to surrender and release the hostages as the fastest way to end the humanitarian crisis. As Witkoff prepares for his visit to Gaza, the health ministry there reports a grim toll: 111 people killed and 820 injured by Israel's military offensive in the last 24 hours. The ministry also reveals a disturbing trend, with 2 people dying of malnutrition in the past day, bringing the total number of malnutrition deaths since the war began to 159, including 90 children. Global food security experts, backed by the UN, warn that the worst-case scenario of famine is unfolding among Gaza's 2.1 million population. UN agencies point the finger at Israel, which controls the entry of supplies to Gaza, for causing mass starvation. Israel, however, insists there are no restrictions on aid deliveries and denies any starvation. Despite this, Israel has implemented measures it claims will aid the UN and its partners in collecting and distributing aid within Gaza. These include daily tactical pauses in military operations in 3 areas, and the creation of designated humanitarian corridors. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, state that 43 aid packages containing food for residents in southern and northern Gaza have been airdropped, and they will continue to work with the international community to improve the humanitarian response. The UN's Humanitarian Office, however, disagrees, stating that the tactical pauses do not allow for the continuous flow of supplies needed to meet the immense needs of the population. Hungry crowds continue to offload supplies from lorries as they pass through Israeli crossings. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, director of Al-Shifa Hospital, confirms the receipt of 54 bodies and 412 injured people from the incident in the Sakin area on Wednesday. The Hamas-run Civil Defense Agency reports at least 30 people killed when Israeli forces opened fire on the aid-waiting crowd. The Palestinian Red Crescent adds that its field hospitals in Gaza City received 6 dead and 274 injured from the same incident. The IDF maintains that troops fired warning shots in response to a threat posed by a gathering of Gazans around aid trucks in northern Gaza. International journalists are barred from entering Gaza independently, making it challenging to verify these accounts. However, a local freelance journalist working for the BBC interviews a man who knew a teenage boy killed in the incident. He describes the desperate situation where people risk their lives to obtain food and water only to be targeted. What was his fault? They sniped him in the middle of his head. He wasn't carrying anything, just trying to survive. His only fault was being Palestinian and living in Gaza, the man laments. Another man reveals that Abu Taha al-Kafane, a father of two and the family's main breadwinner, was among the dead. He went to get flour, not to trade or sell it, but to secure food for his family. They claim they let food in, but they increase the death toll. The morgue is full, he adds. Hospital sources report 6 people killed near a GHF-run aid distribution center in the Rafah area on Wednesday morning. The IDF claims to have fired warning shots at a gathering of suspects posing a threat to its troops, but an initial review suggests the reported number of casualties does not match the IDF's information. The GHF denies any killings at or near its sites on Wednesday. The UN Human Rights Office paints a grim picture, stating that at least 1,373 Palestinians have been killed while trying to get food aid since the GHF began operating in late May. Most of these deaths, it says, were caused by the Israeli military. The office adds that at least 766 of these individuals were killed near one of the GHF's 4 distribution centers, which are located inside Israeli military zones and operated by U.S. private security contractors. Another 288 people were killed near UN and other aid convoys. Each person killed or injured was fighting for survival, not just for themselves, but for their families, the office states, highlighting the increasing number of Palestinians dying from malnutrition. The Israeli military's campaign in Gaza was launched in response to the Hamas-led attack on southern Israel on October 7, 2023, which resulted in approximately 1,200 deaths and 251 hostages taken. Since then, at least 60,249 people have been killed in Gaza, including 111 in the past day, according to the territory's health ministry. This crisis demands urgent attention and a peaceful resolution.